Call the meeting to order. Meeting of the Carver Select Board, November 19th, 2019. This meeting is being cablecast by Area 58 Community Access Media, Channel 15. There are openings on several committees. Please refer to the Select Board page on our website for a listing and application. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll take care of the prayer tonight. Almighty God, humbly we pray your blessing as we concern our life with the opportunity to serve our community. Enhance us with your spirit of dignity and selflessness. May we become instruments of support and understanding as we seek to bring an environment of trust and purpose among all who provide the many services that make us all that we can become. Help us achieve the goals of our commitment in this office that is now our responsibility. And especially, we lift our prayers for all the citizens of our community that we've been allowed to serve, that they may discover the fullness and joy of life that we all seek. And keep those serving in our armed forces and our first responders in our hearts and thoughts. Amen.
Amen.
And now we reach the moment where it's citizen participation. If there are any citizens that would like to address the board this evening, we set aside 10 minutes at the start of our meeting to have anyone that wants to address the board do so. We ask them to keep it to about 3 minutes to give other folks the opportunity to speak. Was there anyone that wanted to speak this evening? Please approach the table and give us your name and address, please.
Hi, it's Donna Marie Forand, South Meadow Village, 27, Unit 8. I just wanted to remind everybody that on December 7th, which is Pearl Harbor Day, we are laying the wreaths at the 3 different cemeteries. And currently we have some businesses that are trying to help us, and also the school and the students are all getting involved as well. So we should have a really good turnout on December 7th. So if anybody still wants to bring wreaths or contact me, right now we're short 180 wreaths.
Okay.
But that's not a bad thing because they're still coming in, so we're excited about that. And I just had some donation came in as I was in another meeting. But the whole idea of the entire event is an intergenerational project. It's civics, it's history, and it's a community coming together. So if anybody would like to participate, we welcome everyone, and if any veterans want to come out.
And what time on the 7th?
It'll be at 10 a.m., and we start at Union Cemetery and work our way down to North Carver. So if you miss us at Union, catch us up at the Central Cemetery.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you, Don.
Actually, don't go anywhere. Were there any other citizens that wanted to approach the board this evening? Being none, Donna Ferrand has requested an appointment as a fence viewer. So Donna, come on back up. And if you want to just mention your interest in being a fence viewer.
Yeah, so I wanted to take this opportunity to show an interest in the fence viewer. I figured it would give me an opportunity to learn some of the different codes and the planning, and then the fence code from downstairs, and also give me the opportunity to learn a little bit more about conservation and how the fences affect the conservation as well.
All right, questions from the board?
That one, CD drawer. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Donna. Mm-hmm. I realized that this was an appointment that Bob brought up some time ago, and since, to the best of my knowledge, we've never had fence viewers. Mm-hmm. My feeling about this was that I think, although we give a general statement at the beginning of the meeting, talking about how there are openings on the boards, this one is kind of unusual. And it seems to me that maybe we could make more of a point about advertising it so that we might get more applicants. And the reason for that is we could actually look at some qualifications.
Is it only an opening, do we only have one fence viewer for the entire town? Or is it?
Well, the
No,
law
there's
says
two.
two.
Yeah.
And we appointed Bob for that.
Okay.
And so when I started looking into the statute, it doesn't really have that much to do with conservation or planning, as far as I can tell.
Well, there's fencing involved in conservation, if you have to have it a certain amount of inches from the ground up. And if I happen to go out and look at a fence and it's in violation of the conservation, then that would
But
be
that's
involved
kind
in
of
that.
conservation's jurisdiction. Yours is a property boundary.
Right, but if I went out to look at a fence and there was an issue, then I would bring it to the appropriate people.
Well, I guess my other point, and this is not personal at all, is that most of the fence viewers in other towns, at least one of the two has some kind of qualification. A lot of them are professional land surveyors. One of them is actually the emergency management director, go figure. One of them is the supervisor of streets. So I just think that it might be worth our while to kind of let this be out there for a little longer, see if someone else wants to come apply for it.
I guess my feeling would be if we were going to take that, then we should open up Bob's position as well, in case we got two people that were eminently qualified for fence viewing that both came in with substantial qualifications and background. So that,
So presently, the fence viewing person happens to be the DPW would go out and look at the fence. So that's what's been happening in the town. So this is obviously a volunteer position and where we're not taking the staff, paid staff to go out and look at a fence. If it needs to be brought to somebody's attention, of course.
But again, my feeling is that the DPW superintendent kind of knows something about that, being that, it's part of his job for a long time. And I don't mean that you shouldn't be a fence viewer either, Bob, but I was just surprised to see this, and when I looked into it, it seemed like it's a pretty important job. A lot of people could be needing to put fences up, and they're not cheap.
Bob?
All right, so one of my things with this is that the town itself, we don't have any bylaws regulating fences, period. There's a problem with that, all right?
We actually have a fencing protocol, which has come from the planning board, and I have it on me if you'd like to see it.
Right, but that's not a bylaw
No,
per
it's not,
se,
but it's
okay,
suggested.
where you actually have some guidance on what's allowed. And I did bring that to the board to take a look at a prior meeting of some of the thoughts and processes that I got from other people in the town, from DPW and planning and whatnot. But I just want to, we really need that one thing that says, okay, this is what's allowed and this isn't allowed. And my main thing with this is, number one, fences are a property issue, all right? It's an issue where they're going to place this fence, and right now, as it is you can put a fence up along the property line, okay? But who's to say if you're really on the property line or not? Where that's something that the fence viewer is going to have to go ahead and go out there. And the only way that we can make that judgment is to say, okay, show us where you had
Surveyed.
it's surveyed to know that you are actually on yours. We have to look at that. And we may have to go to a surveyor and say, hey, listen, you surveyed this property, okay? Is this right or not? Because they went on for your survey, so is it in the right place or not? We're going to have to make the decision. But it ultimately, the two property owners, if we determine that through that surveyor that is on someone else's property, they need to take it off. But we can't really tell them to take it off. We can go to that other property owner and says, listen, you sue them to take it off. All right? So it's a property issue, and that's where you get into that issue where you have to be diplomatic between both of these property owners.
And I think that's where the town wants to not get involved in disputes between neighbors. And I think the other thing is too that what has happened in the past, somebody might take a fence and put up a new fence, but now it's blocking somebody's driveway, so when they pull out of their driveway, they're not able to see. So, sometimes, just having a nice conversation with somebody, you're not going out there to be, an enforcer. You're just going out there to look at the situation. You're not going out really to enforce anything because we don't have a right to enforce it.
Okay, so, and that's where the paperwork that I sent, I brought that into consideration, all right? Just for instance, my mom lives on Raymond Ave in Pembroke. You drive out of Raymond Ave, the guy has a stockade fence that goes almost 4 feet from the roadway. You can't see the cars coming over the hill until you nudge out, but now you're out in the other side of the road. That's something I want to stop, okay, and we shouldn't allow, all right? But we need to have the tools via our bylaws, all right, to regulate that so we can have some
All right, well,
guidelines.
bylaw discussion is sort of.
So, but I just wanted to make
I
sure.
think that we all agree that we probably need to
Okay.
determine whether we
But
need bylaws.
again, to Bob's point, as he said, neither one of them are surveyors, and they may have to hire a surveyor. So I'm simply suggesting that we might hold off on this, advertise it a little better, and see if we can get at least one person who has some sort of skill.
I think we have to do one or the other. Either we open both positions up again, or, otherwise it looks too discriminatory, or we
Yeah,
appoint Donna
no.
and let her learn.
I agree with
Whatever you
that.
guys want to do.
I agree with that.
Which one do you agree with, holding off or getting two different people?
I personally think that when you brought the whole idea of the fence viewer up, we spent a lot of time talking about it. And I think Donna's here, she's applied for the position. And I think we should appoint Donna. I think even if a fence viewer went out there and they were a surveyor, short of them surveying the property while they're there, they're not going to be able to tell where that fence is. So in many cases, you may need a new survey anyway. You may not know. So I personally think Donna's here, she's applied for the position, and we should vote on it.
Other comments from the board?
And just my one last thing is that you do understand, because I've been in this position already, that you're going to have people that are not going to be happy with you no matter what. They're going to be angry at you, they may yell at you. You need to be the diplomat, all right, and treat everybody fairly and equitably, and you can't take sides. It's not a he said, she said, this is what I'm following. Until we follow something that we have in writing, that you have to be fair and unjudgmental on either case.
Oh, I
So-
already stated that. We're not going out there to be bullies, if we want to use that word. I don't know if that's the correct word, but we're going out there just to basically take a look at the situation and come back and have a discussion on it and figure out, is there a problem? And if there is a problem, can we nicely send a letter to the resident and say, can you move it back 10 inches or a foot or whatever the situation is? I totally get respecting people's property and respecting residents. I totally get that.
Other questions?
No.
Is there a motion to appoint Donna to the
I'll make a motion that we appoint Donna as a fence viewer.
second? I'll second it. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
Okay. We'll table this and have it at the next hearing when we have a deciding vote.
Thank you.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you, Donna. You're welcome. Just a quick note that there originally had been scheduled a public hearing on Fiesta Chara because of a liquor issue, but that ended up getting settled, so that hearing was canceled. So it's not on the agenda, but it was advertised, so just in case anybody showed up for that, that hearing turned out to be unnecessary. And also, we will not have the health agent with us at 8 o'clock for the blight nuisance regulation. So that portion of the agenda is also not taking place.
Mr. Chairman, can we get a copy of whatever he has for regulations prior to our next meeting so we can take a look at that?
Sure. Can we request that?
If he has one, yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, we'll call it 7:20, and it's time for our annual tax classification hearing. The Board of Assessors and PK Associates, so if they'd all, who's ever going to be speaking at the table, please step forward and present us with your findings. Names and addresses, please, and functions.
Michael Paddock, Chairman of the Board of Assessors.
Gail McAleer, consulting with PK Valuation Group in West Harwich, Massachusetts.
Okay. you. It is on to you.
Okay, thank you. So, just a quick intro. This is fiscal year 20 is a recertification year. The town went through a complete revaluation, and all of the values have been certified by the Department of Revenue, and everything looks good. We've already been through the public disclosure process and moving forward. So each year, as you know, most of you know, in order to set the tax rate, there are a number of options that the Board of Selectmen need to consider and vote on. And actually, I'm saying this, but I have the packets in front of me and not in front of you. So.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I don't think we set the rate. We set the split.
I'm sorry.
I don't believe we set the tax rate. We set the split. Yeah. Sure. Thank you.
That's nice.
That is that.
We did get it.
I know.
By now.
Yes, yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, as Sarah just pointed out. So you vote a residential factor, and that in essence, and the other votes as well, ultimately determine the rate. Once the values have been certified and the levy determined and the choices made by the selectmen, the rate is an automatic calculation. Oh, yeah. So the residential factor has a little bit more discussion involved with it. And so I thought I'd just skip to the other three options because they're relatively quick. The first one is whether or not to grant an open space discount. That shifts a portion of the residential tax levy to property owners who have property classified by the state, under the state guidelines, as open space. We don't happen to have any of those in Carver, and so it's sort of a moot point. There isn't anyone to shift the burden from to. So historically, the Board of Selectmen have voted not to grant an open space discount. I can sort of give a little bit of a background on each, and you can vote them all together. I think that's how you've done it in the past, or we can go one by one, whichever you
Let's
prefer.
take them one by one.
Okay, so the first one is whether or not the board chooses not to grant, and that would be the motion, not to grant an open space discount, if that's your pleasure.
And could you give us a little background on exactly, just for those that are unfamiliar with it, exactly what that represents?
And the open space discount would be if there were properties. This is sort of to encourage homeowners with properties that are classified as open space to continue them as open space, basically relieving a portion of their tax burden. And the various exemptions vary by how the levy shifts. This particular open space exemption, the levy shifts within the residential class. So if property owners owned property that was classified as open space, which examples of properties that might be, which we don't have any here, but might be, for instance, if there was a subdivision and a very large subdivision, the planning board may require the developer to set aside a certain amount of land for open space, green space. It's not an issue, it's not an occurrence that's happened in this town. And so it would shift the tax burden from any homeowners who have land classified as open space to all the remaining residential homeowners. There are no homeowners who own property classified as open space. So there is no portion of the levy to shift to the remaining portion of the residential levy. I don't know if that's clear as mud or...
Yeah, we go through it every year, but it's just...
Could I interject here,
Sure.
if I may? You said that there are no subdivisions where the developer was required to set aside open space. There are lots of subdivisions in Carver where the developer has been required to set aside open space, primarily 20% open space. And those are our conservation subdivisions. And the open space tax burden is shared by all the residents in the subdivision.
Right, this
So
would
why
be,
does that not count?
because it's classified as a different type of property, and so this is classified as open space, so I'm not sure whether that's classified as perhaps recreational. I'm not quite sure. I don't know the examples.
Well, I don't know how the assessors classify it, but I know that in planning board, they were set aside as open space parcels.
I'm going to allow our, I was going to say old assessor, but instead of old assessor, I'm going to say former
That's it.
assessor.
I am older than I was when I was the assessor.
Yeah, we should sit. You want to sit over here? You want to need another chair?
Take the chair.
Oh, I thought you were going to make me stand.
No, you sit over there and you can answer.
Okay.
We just got another chair.
So, for example, Alexandra Lane was one of those. And what the planning board had said was, you're going to set aside this amount of land as a buffer between the houses whose lot size was decreased or significantly less than what the zoning bylaw calls for. So they took the whole, that way they could fit more homes into this subdivision. The
And-
open space value,
And conserve open space. I mean, it specifically
yes.
says in the conservation subdivision bylaw that it's called open space. I'm just telling you what I know.
but we're talking two different things, though. You're calling that open space without a definition of open space, and open space as a matter of valuation for property taxes is something completely different.
Okay, so
The
the
value
planning board
of
and
that
assessors
open
have different
space.
definitions?
Yeah, they're
Okay.
two different things.
I see.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, actually, Ellen, 1 second. Don't go too far. Don't go too far. Because mine's going to go on. Because we have a development off of High Street right now that they're building. All right, and they have a set spot for open space. Did you hear me?
No, I'm
Okay.
sorry,
So what I'm saying here is, off of High Street, there's a subdivision going in.
Okay.
Cul-de-sac, okay? On the back end, to the right, there's a pathway that goes back and an open space in the back there. It's not owned by any of the residents there, but this was basically the developers. All right? So it's owned by the developer, okay? So would that fall into place with this, where he could take a reduced amount because it's open space? Because really, the definition of open space, what is your definition of open space? Because it's really, your definition and our zoning or planning seem to be in conflict.
Well, open space for valuation purposes really has nothing to do with planning or zoning or anything like that. It's just a concept of having land that is specifically valued as open space. In these instances, like the one you were talking about, they have this little path that goes up to the back and a little path that comes down the other side, and it's supposed to be a wildlife corridor. And that land is supposed to be never touched, but the value of that land is incorporated into each of the individual units in that subdivision. So while it's not being directly taxed separately, because we've seen how those things kind of lose their way, the value of that land, when is 1/6 of the value of the land, or 1/10, or however many houses there are in there, gets added into the value of the house. It's not valued separately. It doesn't have a value that's separate. It's still based on the value of the sales of the houses that are in that subdivision.
So it's really two different concepts between planning and assessing when you use the
Oh.
term open space.
Yes.
Well, I'm still kind of hung up on this, is that what would be considered an open space, all right, that you could go and get this discount if we approved it? What is it actually?
Well, we don't have any
But if it-
properties that are classified
we
open
did-
space anyway.
But if we did, what would it look like? What would it be?
That's a good question.
So how do you know we don't have any?
There has never been a parcel of land in this town since I don't even know when, that's been classified as open space. Most towns don't have any open space classified as open space.
Ellen, are you aware of any open space parcels in another town that you could give us, just so we have some example of what would be considered open space?
I would love to be able to give you one, but every single town that I know of does not have
Okay.
open space. I don't even know why it's still included, but,
Okay.
except that it's in the law.
Thank you.
Chapter 59, by the way.
Mr. Pratt?
I'll just do it here.
Why not?
Steve Pratt, 16 Weston Street. I think the case we have here is a capital O, capital S for open space from an assessor's parcel value, how they value parcels, the 4,500 parcels in town, versus
You wrote that.
small o and small s for open space for any of the cluster home zonings that we have, where they've designated areas. We have one in Vaughan Estates, which is the old stump lot down at the end of Wade. That is considered, but it is,
Those were recreational lots, Steve.
Right.
The ones I'm talking about, there were conservation subdivisions that started probably in the late 2000s. Those were specifically designated open space, and that's where my confusion.
but I think the problem is that from a parcel perspective,
I got that.
that's how they're assessing, and there's no parcels that are identified as quote-unquote open space. It's part of the, the cluster. So,
If you'd let me follow
ahead.
up. On page 2 of your packet, under open space discount, it says, "The open space classification is reserved for properties that could otherwise be held for the production of income, but are instead preserved in an open and natural condition for the benefit and enjoyment of the public, which does not necessarily imply public access to the property."
So the one that I was talking about, it's open to the public.
Is it? I don't know.
Well, that's the way, when I went to planning board for it and listened to them, that when it was created, that was open to the public, and I actually made a point to say, I wanted to make sure that it was protected so no one would hunt in that area, due to the fact of the location of the houses and it being not enough area for it, but I wanted it posted as that, okay, and they all agreed to it. I clearly don't understand is, how are you calculating this property here that got into a subdivision? How are you calculating the property and dispersing it amongst everybody? And how do the people know that you're dispersing that money? Because now you're saying that that's owned by the residents there, that the public has the right to go in there. So now there's a liability to go in there for those people that they may not even know they own that property.
Okay. What we do is, well, first of all, keep in mind that open space, per se, for purposes of evaluation, could be income producing, and that's nothing about what you want. That has no conservation restrictions or anything like that. So it would be open to the public, but it also has to have the ability to be an income producing property. Don't know why that's the way the law was written, but that's it. When you have any of the conservation subdivisions that have gone before planning up to this point, well, up to the point before I retired, were the acreage of the total open space area was divided equally among each of the single-family home parcels and added to their land line, a separate land line for open space, well, for whatever, but they are all paying taxes for that conservation area.
Is that in the record card? Is somewhere
Yes, it's on the
record card where it
property
shows
record
that?
card. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that's always reflected in their deed. So that's how they would be covered for liability purposes and things like that, would be in their deed.
So just a quick question. So we have before us not to grant an open space discount. And we have no properties that are
Yes,
classified as open space.
that's true. And as Gail said, it's a moot point, and we've probably spent too much time on it.
Okay.
I still have an issue with this, that how do you say what's open space and it's not
You're
open
getting
space?
to
and-
what is the definition of open space, but
Well,
in point
that's-
of fact, right now, the
that's-
assessors have no property classified in town as open space.
Well, they don't even know how they classify it, that's what it appears.
That's what it sounds.
No, it has to be income-producing property, the ability to produce income.
All land within the town of Carver is valued in one way or the other. It's classified either by use. These classifications are set by the Department of Revenue, and they're use codes. They call them use codes. There's hundreds of them. Most residential parcels, vacant land is either buildable, unbuildable, unless there's some chapter. And then there's another layer that could be added to that chapter land. There's multiple chapter land, agricultural use and things. But those still go on whether a parcel is, the market value is estimated based on market value of buildable lots, unbuildable lots, potentially buildable lots, but all of that land is valued in one way or the other. This use code classification, called open space, is partially because it is so vague. Most of these lots, they're owned by someone. In the example of the subdivisions, apparently those seem to be condominium subdivisions, I'm assuming.
No, these are not, these are
They're-
house lots.
House lots,
They're
but there's some association or something that pays the
Not
taxes
necessarily,
No.
no.
on the,
That's the way they were, if,
It's all subdivided.
oh, so
if-
a
if
little
we
bit of each of that is
If a
included.
developer wants to shorten his road length so he can shorten his costs, one way to do that is to cluster the homes together, but it's not condominiums, they're single-family homes,
Okay.
and then in the back somewhere is open space land.
So there's
It's
a parcel of
requirement.
land,
Certain percent of the land has to be set aside as conservation for it to be called that.
and is it owned by the developer?
No, it's owned by, as Ellen pointed out, it's owned by the individual residential homes.
So,
They
they
percent.
just made larger lots, each homeowner,
Nope.
Let me explain.
So instead of it being zoning, it's, the regular residential lot is an acre, almost an acre and a half. But in a conservation subdivision, that shrinks to some smaller number, and the rest of the lot remains open space.
oh, but it's still one lot.
So each house has a single lot.
Yeah.
Say the excess is 10 acres, and there are 10 houses. Each one of those people have an acre added to their land value. That's how the taxes are paid on it.
Okay, so an open space lot would be a lot that is in its own parcel. It has to be owned by an entity, a person or an entity, its own individual parcel.
Okay,
And therefore, that parcel would have to be set aside for this open space use.
so ultimately, with that being said, then there are parcels in town that could satisfy that if we had this to get a reduction of the taxes.
Well, there's easier ways. There's actually those chapter lands that I was referring to. There's a lot more restrictions, but there is one of the chapter lands is for preserving land in its open and natural state. And then there's a reduction in tax value as a result of having it in chapter. So there's a lot of relief if a person, designed for farms, cranberry bogs, golf courses, open space, natural, trying to discourage or encourage the environmental protection of land. And so there are statutes in place in the Commonwealth to encourage homeowners to do that.
Okay, so we have a motion, I'm sorry. sir.
I'm sorry, I just was going to make that motion.
Is there a motion to not grant an open space discount?
Motion to not grant an open space discount.
Is there a second?
I'll second for discussion.
Further discussion?
I'd like to see, if there are, for next year, I want to see that the Assessors Department come out and take a look to see how many properties do fit this category as open space, to find out
If any.
if any are actually out there that could use this, because, I mean, if they're paying an extra sum of money for the taxes for it, but it's really nothing, it's not going to be used for anything, I mean, then maybe there's a possibility that hey, if they're not going to build on it or whatnot, then maybe they can take advantage of it.
That was my feeling.
Right, it's a challenging thing because, if they're not going to build on it, it's one of those things, it's not uncommon for people to come into the assessor's office and argue that their lot is not buildable, but there's no evidence to that fact. And so, and then oftentimes, it's challenging because if someone's taxes are reduced because of a factor that isn't permanent, there actually are conservation restrictions. And I think that's probably why this classification isn't used very often, because there's other remedies that sort of are more palatable to both the taxpayer and the town. There are permanent conservation easements that can be placed on land if it truly is not going to be built upon in perpetuity, and that definitely does engage or create a situation where the tax value would be reduced because the market value on an unbuildable lot is substantially less than a buildable lot. So if a homeowner truly desires to never have a lot built upon, and they want their valuation reduced to reflect that, there are options by statute. But it's challenging. I've seen, luckily not too many times, but where properties, for whatever reason, were assessed as unbuildable, probably because they didn't conform to zoning laws or shape or whatever, and someone comes in for a variance, and they get a building permit for it, and as assessors, they'd been under-assessed for decades as an unbuildable lot. And so, that's not a very desirable situation either, because the remaining tax base was basically funding that undervaluation. So it's kind of a delicate situation. If it's just someone saying, well, I really plan to keep it open space forever, there's remedies to kind of codify that.
So I guess, again, to Bob's point, we'd ask that when you come in next year, if the assessors could report on whether they explored this issue and whether there are any properties that should be considering this. The fact that pretty much every town around us has nothing listed as open space tells me that it's not a major issue. However, it's worth looking into.
Certainly.
Motion made and seconded to not grant an open space discount. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the ayes have it. Next, not to grant a residential exemption.
This
And again, if I
example.
could ask for a brief explanation on this.
Yes. This sort of is almost the same explanation as the open space. The residential exemption was initially created for communities that have large second homeowners, they're referred to, but sometimes it's third and fourth homeowners, where there's a large percentage of the population who owns property in a town, but it's not their primary residence. And so the statute was devised so that, again, the shift is just within the residential class, and it shifts a percentage of the tax burden from the full-time resident, the residents of the community, to the part-time residents of the community. And so it's very popular in a lot of coastal communities where there are a lot of properties that, as I said, are vacation homes. And so anyway, in Carver, we don't have that situation. It's not a tourist-type destination, particularly. And so there's most of the residents that own property most of the homeowners in Carver it's their primary residence. So again, there's no one to shift the burden to, and so typically you have voted to not grant a residential exemption.
All right, does someone want to make a motion to not grant a residential exemption?
Motion to not grant a residential exemption.
Motion
Second.
made and seconded, further discussion? Being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. All right, not to grant a small business exemption.
Yes, this one, again, this one shifts within the commercial industrial class. And so this shifts the burden, if adopted. It would shift the burden from businesses with less than 10 employees who meet various other conditions to any large businesses. And because in the town of Carver, the majority, by and large, of the businesses in town are small businesses, we don't have a huge amount of box stores or large corporations to shift to. Again, it's just not an exemption that would be of any benefit, and so traditionally you have voted not to grant a small commercial exemption.
Is there a motion to not to grant a small business exemption?
Motion not to grant a small business exemption.
Second. Can I discuss for a second?
Yep.
I just, with this one, it says for not less than $1 million there. If the urban renewal plan comes to fruition at some time or whatnot, where we have a larger business base up there, this is something we may want to look at for some of our smaller businesses.
Absolutely, I think it is.
So I want to keep this in mind in the future, that try to help the small businesses, because they're getting hit right now with a larger tax bill right now, and because of the dual tax rate, so.
Yeah, I agree, especially with the split, but unfortunately, right now, there's not don't have that large commercial base, so.
Correct.
Motion made and seconded. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, and I guess now we go to the big ticket item?
The big ticket item.
Check it out. Yeah.
All right, so at the top, I just wanted to follow up that small business exemption. You vote that. You have the opportunity to vote that every single year at the classification hearing. So the residential factor, previously, last year, the board voted 145% shift, and as there weren't major shifts in the valuations, as reflected on page 4 of the packet that you were given, the Board of Assessors has recommended to maintain that same 145% shift, which results in a residential factor, is how it calculates when you're multiplying it out for the tax rate, of 0.903739.
So while you're taking all those numbers in, the one that will matter for us tonight would be the second line from the bottom. At the 145%, you'll see that the tax change for the average residential taxpayer will be $200.
So for the average home, it's a $200 increase?
It would be a $200 increase.
And that's for a $329,300 home.
That is
That's
correct.
right here. I mean, I just looked at my property record card, to be totally honest, before, because I got this this morning, for me to read it over, and then I went to my property record card, and I says, ooh, I jumped from here to here, but I did do an addition to the house, whatever. And the way I look at it is that I went from $479,900 to $559,400, all right? And then I looked at what my valuation of it is, and it came out to $49.25, where my total tax would be $7,481 a year, give or take a couple of dollars here and there in CPA tax or whatever for that too. So, I mean, when you start talking about the average single-family home, you have to bear in mind that people want to know what their numbers are. If it was this number or this number, this is what's going to be. When you say average, it would be really good if you came out and said, well, if your house is this amount of money, this is how much it's going to raise. So if your house is worth 250, it's this, 350, 450, 550, that you actually came up and said, hey, this is how much it is. So when you come to us, we can say, okay, fine, we don't have to do the calculations. Just an FYI here for me, but
We are saying the tax rate would be $17.19 for the current year, so people can just multiply the valuation of their home by that rate and figure out what the.
well, actually, it's not really the 559 that you go by. You go by the recalculation number on the bottom, correct? On your property record card?
I'm
Could
sorry.
be wrong.
You're saying.
Okay. Please educate me then.
Right.
Okay.
Wait a minute, who said you get a turn?
Go right ahead, because I'm not understanding this question.
Yeah, he's up here. So I understand what you're saying, and it, it's confusing as it is, but a lot of times it's, we can look at it and say, all right, if it's an average home is $300,000 or so, plus or minus, and the average increase is in a residential tax bill is about $200. So then you can say, okay, well, it's a $600,000 home, it's going to be about $400, and $500 might be just a little shy of that. So ballpark. I mean, at that point in time, it's not exact, but sometimes it gives people a benchmark. They can kind of say, all right, my house is twice as much as that, so it's going to be about a $400 a year increase in my tax bill. The assessor's office has it. I think the new values are on the website, and they will, once at the conclusion or tomorrow sometime, they'll be putting the new tax rate, depending upon the percentage that's voted this evening, the residential factor that's voted this evening. And so, yeah, I don't know if the public disclosure notices, if that was, probably not, sorry. Just that, hopefully that estimated, the average value and the estimated, or the increase in the taxes, it gives people an idea if they're lower or higher than that amount. Sorry.
A couple of reasons on why we'd like to, and I'm sorry, I got glasses problems. Have to put them on to see you guys, take them off to look down. A couple of reasons behind where the board is at in their recommendation. All right, as you know, as some of you know, we've come before you year after year and asked to lower it, just on the standpoint of fairness, that there's not a lot of towns of our size and shape. Well, there aren't a lot of towns of our size and shape, but those that are close rarely shift, and rarely shift this much. I mean, our assessing company that we trust to do all our work has used the word cruelty when he's described how we split our taxes here toward businesses. All right, so just on the tax fairness side, there's some issues there with how much we should do. We're up to 145, so we're just about up to the ceiling on what we can do.
And we've been in this range for
a while.
pretty much since the school, I think.
Yes, yeah, we've been 140, 145, and going up and down. And if I had my way, I'd ask for 143. But then the numbers get even more complicated. One thing that we need to remember, and I know you guys have been learning about this because it's one of the Trojan horses that sneaks in on us, is the personal property that comes in under the commercial and industrial. Okay, the personal property is a problem because it goes into the levy, but it depreciates sometimes rather quickly. So it looks like we're getting a bump in the cash, and then all of a sudden it's dumped on the residents. It's dumped on the regular homeowners, the taxpayers are paying this, when it looked really good up front. So the temptation is always there to raise the rate to as far as we can go because it gets revenue up front, and it does. But what ends up happening is that revenue goes into the levy calculated at the highest rate possible. So the amount that the levy goes up is the highest it can go up. And it's a number that sneaks up on us and I believe will snowball over the coming years. It already has been snowballing. Our Proposition 2.5 this year is giving us a 3.7% increase in taxes. And part of the reason in that difference is these things that are tucked away that we don't see, that look good up front. And I'm hoping that you guys want to be around here for the next 20 years and see where all this goes. I know our administrator has been talking about how to deal with some of these personal property issues so they don't affect our town, because when we have all this solar property that's been built. And that personal property, if it lasts 10 or 20 years or whatever the programs are, there's going to be a day coming where there'll be a reckoning. And we're going to face that it goes away, but it's gone, and it's still in the levy, so it goes on top of everybody's tax bill. So the concern is that we're going to one day have a really big jump if we keep pushing this as high as we can, and I'm hoping in years to come that we can work this back to make it safer for the residents. It looks good up front, but it's one of those things where nothing's free. You can grab it now, we'll pay for it later. So we're asking, because we believe that that this is the best we can get, that if we can hold the line here, it would be a good start. And maybe someday we can work back on this so that we'll be safer down the road, because I plan to be living here 30 years from now, and I'm afraid to see what my financial planning will have to be so that I can continue to live in the town of Carver that I love so much. And that's all I have to say about that.
Mr. Pratt, before we go any further,
Unless there's someone else that would like to speak first.
you're it.
Come on down.
Stephen Pratt, 16 Weston Street. It was 9 years ago when the select board at the time asked us to form the Town Building Study Committee. And at that time, the purpose of the Town Building Study Committee was to try to figure out a way to do buildings in this town, police, fire, school buildings, without having a significant impact on the taxpayers. And to that end, we evaluated our revenue streams, and we evaluated repeatable and sustainable revenue streams. And one of the things we identified was personal property. Personal property over the last 20 years has increased significantly. We've had $131 million of new growth just from personal property. Well, I don't dispute that the split tax rate taxes commercial, industrial, and personal property more. We've had $25 million of new growth in commercial properties. We've had $9 million of new growth in industrial properties in the past 20 years. And we've had $181 million of residential new growth. So having a lower tax rate for the residents hasn't caused a housing boom in Carver. And in fact, we've generated millions and millions of dollars added to the tax levy because we've had a split tax rate. And one of the questions that's never been asked, and I asked the assessors this evening, and I posed it to the board before the meeting, is when we set a tax rate, do we think about the impact it's going to have on the added tax levy from new growth in subsequent years? Because this year's tax rate that you set tonight, no, I'm sorry,
It's not a rate.
the factor, the shift that the board votes on tonight will determine what is added to new growth next year based upon the values of new residential, commercial, industrial, and personal property. This year, there's a significant amount of new growth being added to the tax levy. $542,000 of new growth in addition to 2.5. The tax levy is increasing 4.5%. That's a significant amount, given day. It's over $1 million and has nothing to do with overrides and has nothing to do with debt exclusions. The majority of that new growth, $275 million of that, is personal property. That's what's being added to the tax levy just from personal property. Residential is only adding $143,000. My recommendation is that we should, if we are looking to sustain revenue growth at the pace we have, and I've looked back at 20 years for the town of Carver, had we had a straight tax rate, a single tax rate, instead of the split rate that we've had, and our shift over that time has been approximately a 7% reduction for residential, and about a 38% increase on the commercial, this fiscal year alone, we would have had $900,000 less in the tax levy. And that's at a minimum, because I didn't recalculate the tax levies on the premise that it was a lower tax rate. So we would have been giving up that money. So a question would be, what would the town be doing with $900,000 less this year in doing budgets? and turning to the schools and telling them that they have 70% less of $900,000. My recommendation is that everything I've looked at for the last 20 years, everything that I know what's coming down the pipeline for personal property, and historically, we've seen commercial and industrial grow, even though there's been a higher tax rate, is to go to the maximum. Go to the 150, and that way, next year, if our commercial, industrial, and personal property values are greater, we will add more to the tax levy. I entirely agree that there's a shoe to drop. Personal property is one of those things that will depreciate in value, has a useful life, and will we be retired? Because we've already seen it. And we've seen it in NSTAR. When they removed the old transformer and put in the new transformer, we had an $11 million drop in value from the old transformer, and we had a $37 million increase in value from the new transformer. That $11 million in taxes, $11 million in value times whatever the tax rate is, call it $25, $27, whichever one you like. All those taxes that paid, that $300,000 in taxes, are distributed amongst everybody else. Somebody's got to pay it because it's in the tax levy. So what do you have down the road at your disposal? What tools do you have in your toolbox? You have the ability to do an underride. If it's significant enough of a shift, you can do an underride. But the question right now is, do you want to put yourself in a position where you know, based on historical past, you are going to increase your tax levy less next year if you don't go to the maximum? And if you ever thought of going to a straight rate, you're significantly putting the town at a financial disadvantage and basically forcing yourselves to go to the voters, go to the residents, and ask for an override. Because again, I'll go back to you, what would you do if you had $900,000 less in fiscal 2020? How would you make up that gap? You can't just go and make up the money. You've got to find it somewhere. You need a stream of revenue. And the stream of revenue for the past 20 years has been personal property. And while I agree that the shoe is going to drop at some point on some of these personal properties, $80 million of the personal property out of the $111 million, and that was based on last year, is NSTAR Eversource. So unless NSTAR and Eversource is going to start replacing transformers and towers and more lines and removing the value, the useful life of that, and putting in new stuff, there's not going to be a shift of a significant amount. But if they go and put a brand-new transformer in that's never been in town before, that's going to generate new growth. And if you have that opportunity to tax it at $28 instead of at $19, it doesn't take much to do the math. And the good thing about personal property, just like all the other, anything else added to the levy, each year afterwards, it increases by 2.5%. If you go look at my presentation from June 27th, 53% of the current tax levy for the town of Carver is directly related to new growth since fiscal 1982. Only 29% of it is related to the $3 million tax levy we had in 1982 to the $26 million tax levy, well, the estimated $26.5 million that we were expecting. Now we get an extra $500,000 almost. Most of the tax levy is all related to new growth. We have to maximize new growth in order to sustain the revenue. So that's my opinion. Happy to answer questions.
A couple of questions. One, does anyone remember, we're saying 200 this year, does anyone remember what it was last year?
Yes.
The average?
Yeah. So last year, tax bills went up $256, average tax bill.
256?
256, 219 the year before that, 434 the year before that, which is when the override went in, 146 year before that, and $73 a year before that, if you want me to go back any further.
Yeah, well, I'm tying it to when the school came in and the promises.
Yeah, it was that 400, yeah, it was that big bump
Yeah.
We had in 17, yeah.
So that, I know, so this would actually be less than the increase from
Agreed.
last year.
Agreed. Again, I'm trying to balance increase in tax bills, and I understand commercial with that, and I also, to be honest with you, there's other factors that are causing the commercial tax bill to increase, and I don't know if the assessors want to discuss that in the public forum or not, but, you know, there's a significant change in commercial values this year that is causing the commercial value properties to increase that weren't in play last year.
I think something else that, that we should talk about is the fact that we did start diverting the personal property new growth into the capital stabilization fund. Had we not done that and dedicated it toward the town infrastructure, our operating budget would have grown almost geometrically, and we'd have a crumbling infrastructure. We'd be a little more flush in the operating budget. However, you know, I think that it was an extremely wise thing to do, to divert those funds, to give us the tools to maintain the infrastructure and still have the budget, you know,
Yeah, I mean,
to
you
work
know,
with.
if you think about it, you know, the debt exclusion is adding about 4% to the tax levy, the $1 million. The override that we passed in 1987, it is almost 14% of the existing tax levy. It's over $3.5 million as to what that represents. Like I said, so we bit the bullet. I mean, we bit the bullet, you know, 30 years ago. And, you know, I agree that we needed to do something with respect to the buildings, and I'm glad that, you know, we were able to pass the school, and, you know, the school bite hasn't been as bad because of other things that the board and the town administrator have done to help ease that. But again, I'm looking forward, you know, to revenue streams in the future, and if we want to maximize our revenue stream, I think the 150 is the place we want to be. I have other documentation in my presentation. I don't want to do it tonight because it was 2.5 hours. But, you know, the town of Carver is not, the town of Carver does have the one of the lower tax rates, tax bills, I should say, in Plymouth County. But we also have the lower per capita income. We're ranked 23rd in per capita income. We're ranked 23rd in equalized value, but we rank 20th in tax bills. So we're not that far from where we should be, in my opinion, because equalized values and per capita income is how the state determines Chapter 70 monies. It's how they determine general aid. You know, those are the basis for how we get it. And so, to me, it would make sense that we should be in line with our income and our equalized values. And I think a less of an increase, because I don't know if it was in your packets, this ugly-looking spreadsheet. Because this was the rate, you know, what would be, so, and I'll pass this to you. So the residential rate, instead of being $17.19, would go down 20 cents to $16.99, in my recommendation. You don't have this, Ron?
Yeah, we do. It's
you do have
listed.
it. Oh, okay. Oh,
We have that.
Smaller version.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They have a better version. So, and the commercial would go up to
28.
28, right, 54. And again, I'm looking at it from a perspective as to historically, commercial, industrial, and personal property new growth value has exceeded residential in terms of its impact on the tax levy. And we were in fiscal year 2007 at 1.5. So it's not like we haven't been here before.
Which fiscal year? 2007?
2007. And that coincidentally was the last year of the debt exclusion for the high school, believe it or not.
All right, back to the board. We heard from the assessors and other folks. What's the board's thought? I mean, on the one hand, the assessors are recommending a shift that would be about, what, $56 less than the average increase last year, so it would still be, and for those of us that have been around since the school went live, we had made a commitment to try to maintain the residential tax burden, or not increase the residential tax burden, as part of our commitment to building the new school. So I think the 145, given that it's down $56 from last year, meets that commitment. The question would be whether we want to take it another step to provide additional relief to the residential taxpayer, with the recognition, as Mr. Paddock represented, that at some point, unless we have, we don't know what may happen in the future, that might soften the blow down the road.
If you'll excuse me, and we may have bit the bullet in the past, but if we continue, they're going to drop a bomb. There's going to be a bomb that comes.
Well, you never know. Someone may come into town
and save the day. That could happen, and that would be nice, and I'd be as thrilled as anyone else.
I wouldn't necessarily count on it.
Right.
Yeah.
In the meantime, maximizing revenues will always mean higher taxes for everyone.
So let's just have the discussion before we make a motion. So, Bob?
So, these numbers that you presented with us tonight, they're all based on that 145%, correct? Yeah.
On page 4, at the top is the 145, yes, but down below shows you the alternate shift.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the numbers at the top here, if we kept the 145%, we're increasing $1 million more this year, correct? $1 million, 162? That's the increase from last year to this year.
The tax levy is going up $1,162,000.
Right, that was as a result of the 2.5% plus growth.
Plus the growth there.
But it's not related to this year's taxes.
Right.
That's next year.
What do the assessors think about Mr. Pratt's, I'm serious.
Well,
I mean, I want to get everyone's opinion.
Well, if you want to know, it's as simple as this. Mr. Pratt is looking to maximize revenue, all right, which is to get as much money as we can from people, property, and businesses in this town. All right, he sees a difference between the taxpayers who are business owners and the taxpayers who are just residents. The Board of Assessors tries to see every taxpayer the same and try to give equal respect to that. We also are trying to be a little more farsighted, especially those of us who intend to live here for the rest of their lives and hope for them to be long ones. Want to be farsighted in what things will be like 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And we see some things that have happened, especially in the personal property, that will have long-term consequences that this does not help. That's how we feel.
I just wanted to say that I appreciate your Trojan horse analogy. We'll just have to keep that in mind.
I guess I'll just express my opinion is that, well, I understand what Steve is saying. If we're actually being offered an opportunity to keep it at 145 and coming in with a lower overall increase than we had last year, that seems fair and in keeping with our commitment to the residents.
I agree with that. Correct me if I'm wrong, didn't we increase the shift last year from 140 to 145?
Yes.
Yeah, so I tend to agree. I think I'd like to keep it at the 145, and that also leaves ourselves a little bit of room. We're not at the max in case, for some reason in the future, we need a little wiggle room, so.
Any motion from the board?
I make a motion that we accept the Board of Assessors' recommendation for the tax shift at 145%.
I second that.
Further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
All right, so just to be clear, the motion, I appreciate that, thank you very much. The motion, just so somewhere in there it says about the residential factor of the
Sorry.
point.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
The residential factor would be
Yep.
.903739. Is that what you wanted me to
Yes.
add?
Yes, please.
Did
All
I
right,
say the
We'll
numbers?
revote that then.
Actually, I
To
don't.
include the
Yes.
residential
Yes.
factor of 90.903739.
Perfect.
That's what I,
Thank you.
That's what I just
I was just restating that that's what we're revoting.
right.
Motion made, was there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I have a hard copy of for you to sign to validate that you just took those motions as you've just stated. And also, the Department of Revenue wants each of you to digitally sign this as well. And so Meg is all set with her handy-dandy little laptop to, if you can each break away in a moment. I'm
And I have your password, in case you've forgotten it. I don't have Mark's or Bob's, so you guys will have to log in. I can't help you, is what
Yeah,
I'm saying.
but-
I can help the two of you though, if you need.
So
to log in.
we want to do that now?
We were hoping to get the tax rate in as soon as possible, just because they've got a
All right,
backlog
let's-
at this point.
By our personal password, do you mean our email password?
No.
No, we gotta set it
it's
up.
the login credentials to Gateway.
Oh, okay.
Like what I have written down here, I guess? To open up my computer. If you know the names of my grandkids, you can get to anything I have.
If your assessment is $559,000 at the tax rate that was just approved, your tax bill is $9,600.
Because mine was like, I knew I did something wrong. Did that include the CPA tax too?
No.
That's what I figured, okay. So I'm
In
closer to
order to do
10.
your CPA tax, take $459.
Yeah. It's all right, I'm being overassessed no matter what, because they say I have 2 units and I got 2 kitchens, and I don't.
It's probably like $9,800 because yours is closer.
Steve, thank you.
Yeah,
Even though
thank you.
you carry the day most years, so,
and your password.
you gotta give us one once a year.
No, I know. I need to do it. I think the problem is gonna be
You know what the password is, but I've never logged in.
is when the show's gonna drop.
Are we still personal property?
Yes.
Let them know first.
No, it's only been in conversation.
But that's exactly what Mr.
We
Paddock
just-
said.
No, and I agree with him. I agree. I said that 9 years ago.
But again, you never know, circumstances can change, industries can change, relief may come in some form, we just don't know.
Some building may come in and all of a sudden,
For me, it's the commitment we made when we agreed to build the school, to keep the pressure off the residents for as long as possible.
but even you're still increasing the tax bill more than the rate of inflation.
But we're doing it, well, I mean, again, you can only go so high.
I mean, residential tax bill's going up 3.7.
But we're not alone, it's not as if we're unique.
We didn't talk about the other reason why corruption is a problem. Not gonna. I behaved.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, this is just a specific to Gateway. It's just to set the tax rate.
Okay.
And I do have everyone else's. And then,
This is probably riveting for the home audience right now, just. Bob, did you sit on this yet? We're losing people to commercials now. Peter, if you want to go to a temporary pause.
Hopefully I remember it.
I was asking Peter if you wanted to go to a temporary pause, because this is riveting for our Nielsen ratings are going to drop dramatically now as a result of this.
why are you not at
One, riveting information. The toilet paper in this town stinks. It's single ply, it's rough, and I think we need something else.
You know, Bob, this is my 15th year doing this. And
This was brought up by employees, so I said, you know what, I'll be happy to bring this up. That
do you think
maybe,
it really needed to go to this level? We couldn't just sort of
but
catch
you
a
know
maintenance
what?
guy
The
and...
public has a right to know. You don't want to use the toilets here because the toilet paper's rough.
Okay, Bob, what's next?
All right. See, made you laugh, huh? Come on.
You need to increase the budget for that.
All right, I want to give an update to the hazardous waste day that we had. It went off really good. I have to say, the employees that we had working there were awesome. They did their job well. It was a nice, even flow that went through.
Even flow going
There you go, yeah. All right. There were a couple issues, little minor things for the next time that we do it. But we had 160 vehicles pass through. We could have had a lot more. The one in Marion, there was a 40-minute wait. They were putting 35 to 40 cars every 20 minutes. They were going through there. The way it was set up was awesome. They came in, I don't know if anybody took advantage, I did, but you drove into the DPW building, went around the salt shed, drove in, dropped your stuff off, went around the building, drove right out. You took a right on South Meadow Road, everyone followed what they were supposed to do with the containers, you're not gonna get your containers back. That worked awesome, and that helped the flow of everything. So I just wanna say thank you very much to our town employees. You did an awesome job. Some of the issues that we may want to look at if we do it, because the district paid for it this year, may not happen next year. So we have to look at it from the town standpoint of, are we going to do one for ourselves every year or every 2 years or something like that? And it's at like a $30,000 cost, okay? 160 cars, that was nothing for 3 hours a time. All right, we could have doubled that, easy. But we would need signage, better signage on Pond Street and Center Street to let people know this was going on. One of the issues I did find where a couple of cars got stuck in the traffic line, and one was a med-flight nurse that he needed to get over there. And that's one of the things that I made sure that she got out and got around, because she didn't know anything was going on that road. So I made sure. So some better signage would be better. The notification process could have been a little sooner for people too. I know we sent notices out, I put it on Facebook, but just to let people know what's going to happen. And then spent fuel, that was one of the other issues where gas tanks, if someone had some old gas, they wanted to get rid of it, but they wanted their gas tank back. And you know what? We have to do something with that to let them know, all right, yeah, you can get that one back. All right, either we let them come back to the DPW another day or whatnot, that they can come retrieve what they have, put a sign on it or something with their name on it. But that was it. I mean, it was a really good day, and they even put me to work. So, so that's that. The next thing, on Wade Street. So the RDA came before the board here, and Wade Street property was given from the redevelopment authority to the Board of Selectmen. They gave it back to us, okay? But the deed never got transferred back to the selectmen. All right, and now the RDA is working to do something with that property there with supposedly the people that are building that development off of South Meadow Road. I.e., I went to one of those meetings and I talked about possibly them putting an easement for us, for the town to use that property. And now they want to come back and basically do the opposite and do something with that property. But I think that's a vital property there for the town to keep, not to do anything with. So in my opinion, the MOU that we did with them, there's got to be an expiration date on that, not just a...
And again, this probably needs to be more of an agenda item to get into.
Well, I'm just putting it out there to let you know, Ron, that, hey, this is something that we really need to look at, because I went back to the meeting minutes and it did. The RDA did give it back to the Board of Selectmen.
But no one ever executed that?
But nobody executed it with the deeds. But even still, just that, them handing it to us, telling us, it's yours now, we don't want it, okay? That's like that's not right, all right? It's ours, it's our property, and we should reclaim it back.
Wait a minute. It was initially in the RDA control.
Well, it was initially in the Board of Selectmen's control. Board of Selectmen gave an MOU to the redevelopment authority to do something with that property. All right, most MOUs have a expiration date on it. It doesn't last forever, okay? They came before the board and gave it back to the board
How long ago was this?
a couple of years ago. And I think I sent Elaine the information, right, with that? For the dates
So
on
your
it?
understanding is that the board currently should be controlling the property.
Correct.
And what do you want to, well, never mind. You know
Okay,
what, let's-
so put it on the next agenda and
This needs to be an
let's,
agenda item.
Yeah, that needs to be an agenda.
for that, okay? I'll keep this as innocuous as possible, but it's good to see our staff keeping their skills and training up, and I know they know who they are out there. It's good to know that our town is protected in all different ways, shapes and sizes here. But I do want to say to the employees, thank you very much. The clerk's office, they're codifying our bylaws, which is really good for our town. So we actually can look at them and search for what we need. Our maintenance staff, including the mechanics and everything, are prepping our vehicles for the winter, and I think that's awesome that they're taking the heads on and making sure that all the vehicles are good to go. I went to the Council of Aging Board of Directors meeting tonight. Kind of concerned with a couple of
I'm
things.
gonna have to stop you there. I've been concerned about this for a while, and remember when you and Sarah raised the issue that Michael was bringing up points under his town administrator updates that were not advertised in the agenda?
Yeah,
And I had conversations with town council to determine if that was accurate, and it came back accurate. If he's gonna talk about it, it should be discussed. In that same conversation, he said that selectmen notes, if there's gonna be anything substantive, selectmen notes up until the last 6 months were basically thank yous and updates as to things that were coming up and so forth. It was very, average stuff. Over the last 6 months, it's gotten more pointed, bringing up issues, and town council said it's an open meeting law violation to bring up issues in selectmen's notes that were not advertised for discussion. So going forward,
But
No,
no
that's
one,
not-
no one's
Don't-
asking,
Mr.
no one's asking
Chairman.
for a vote.
I understand
Right,
that.
I mean-
All right.
It is still, but there's discussion that takes place?
the open meeting law, Ron, says if the chairman did not reasonably anticipate the conversations that were going to be held, okay, then it's not an open meeting law complaint, okay?
I'm telling you,
But-
I have had individuals complain to me. Town council is saying that it is a violation of the open meeting law, even though you may disagree with him. Kingston, Plymouth, Duxbury, Middleborough, Lakeville don't even have select board updates at all. Wareham's the only town near us that does.
So can I just ask a clarification?
Yes.
So did town council say that we couldn't, that, say, I individually, for example, could not mention something under my select board update? Or did town council say that if I mention it, it can't be discussed by the board?
Basically, nothing should be brought up, as I understood it, nothing should be brought up. For instance, Bob's about to discuss, provide us with his sense of what happened at the COA board meeting this evening.
You don't know what I was going to say because I didn't say it.
Right, and furthermore, if.
Well, you were just about to tell me that you attended the COA board meeting. That wasn't on our agenda this evening.
I understand, Ron, but if Bob or any of us aren't asking the board to have a discussion.
It's not a question. We shouldn't be weaponizing the select board updates to bring up individual agenda items that we think are important.
But
For years, the only thing that we did with the board updates were, we've been invited to a dinner at the Old Colony Regional Vocational School, and what you just did, giving updates about how the hazardous waste event went, and thanking people for the jobs that they're doing. That's what it has traditionally been.
So
Lately,
that's just
we have
not
been
true.
using it to target people, to bring up personal issues. You
That's
tried to
not
bring
true.
up a letter that we received from a woman.
Right.
and wanted to get into some sort of personnel issue at the
no,
last
it's-
meeting,
it's
which is
public.
completely
It's a-
outside of our
It's
jurisdiction.
a public email.
It doesn't matter, there's a public email, it should not be this is a business meeting of
I
the
understand.
town.
I was, you
Right.
don't, you don't know what I was going to say because you didn't let me finish, which is not in the minutes, and I'd like to see it in the minutes.
As long as you want to
However-
admit that it was outside the jurisdiction of the board.
No, I was simply going to talk about it and ask then that it be put on the agenda as an item. But I did not
It's not
get
even an agenda item that the board should consider.
Mr. Chairman, could I
I
just
think it is.
comment on this whole thing? I think maybe we're talking around the whole thing. I think the point is that with selectmen's updates, that whether a member of the board is asking for comment or not, that's not the point. The thing is that sometimes things are brought up that need a comment, that we all may feel differently about. And if they're brought up during selectmen's updates, then that doesn't give all of us the opportunity to talk about it, where some of these things might be more appropriate for an agenda item where we could discuss it in open. I think that's the point you're trying to make. I think
I think a lot of the stuff that's been coming up, basically, if you feel it's that important, you can say, Ron, would you please put this on the agenda for discussion? And not, give us your opinion on something that has transpired, and, that we might have different opinions on. I mean, all right, I think it's completely inappropriate what you were going to bring up. You don't, you think it's completely appropriate that you do. So, I mean, I've been on this board for years. Select updates were always just very generic. They were not intended to be targeted at people to make points, to ridicule people, to attack people. And there have been some of that taking place. I've gotten phone calls from citizens saying, why did you let so-and-so go on about that?
And Ron, I've been on the board for 10 years myself, and I'm sorry, but that's just not true.
It absolutely is true.
And you, by framing it that way, you're implying that either I or Bob or both of us.
Or anybody on the
We're
board.
trying to ridicule someone.
I've heard other people from the left side make personal attacks.
Okay. I
And
disagree
again,
with
so
that. I'd like to
I'm
see
working
that
off
in
the-
writing from our town council.
So
Well, let me put it this way. As chair, it is my prerogative to create the agenda. 5 towns right around us don't even have it. And I'll remove it from the agenda if it's going to continue to be weaponized and used as a political weapon, as opposed to simply doing our job. This is a business meeting we're a board conducting business of the town of Carver. We are not trying to carry out any personal vendettas here.
And I personally agree with you. I am not ever trying to carry out any kinds of
But it
vendettas.
sometimes is perceived that way.
Well, I can't help somebody's perception, Ron. My
But
goal,
if we
I
avoid getting
believe,
into discussion
I-
of things that should properly be agenda items.
well, I believe that it's important to bring up certain things, that's also part of our job, and then to request that it be put on the agenda. But to be shut down because of something that you thought I was going to say is that's never happened to me before.
Well, I think that the select updates have taken a turn over the last 6 months that I never saw in my previous experience on the board.
Well, I think that's where there should be a change. All right? The Board of Selectmen have sat here and done nothing to the extent of allow somebody else to run things and to do things and to say things and to go ahead. And I
Somebody
think
else
we
meaning
need.
who? Who are you alluding to when you
Okay,
make a comment?
what I am saying
Who
here
are you
is,
alluding to
we
when you
need.
make that comment?
We, as Board of Selectmen, should have the right to go ahead and bring up ideas and issues and suggestions within our meeting here. That's what we're here for.
Then
All right,
have it
we
put on
were.
the agenda for proper discussion and notice to the town that we will be discussing that.
When we have selectmen notes where we're allowed to speak, it's our turn as an individual on this board to go ahead and make some comments and statements that's related to our town. And if it can open up the eyes for someone to see, maybe we can do it better or do it a different
And
way.
that's in your opinion, Bob.
And
We're
that-
getting Bob Belbin's opinion of what's important.
That's right. The open meeting law is, I want to say this, the open meeting law is not there to restrict government. It's not.
Well, basically, then, you want the ability to speak unopposed on any topic. You, for instance, let's say you were going to give us an update on the COA meeting tonight and how you felt things were done inappropriately, and you had...
Did I say it was done inappropriately?
No, you didn't say, no. because it's not appropriate
Because if
to
you-
discuss what
if you
happened
would-
at the COA board. It's got nothing to do with us. We have no jurisdiction over the Council on Aging.
Well,
Well, just to put it this way, Ron, okay?
Pardon me?
I think,
there is,
Their personnel code? We have
Wait.
responsibility
excuse
for
me,
the personnel code?
excuse me.
Ron.
Ron, you're not listening.
Will
I
you
said the
listen to
town
me?
has a personnel code, and
Town
we are
does.
part of
Individual
it.
boards do.
We are part of the town's personnel code, and we do play a role.
what I saw tonight was a group of people that had differences that spoke it out and had issues, okay? It didn't go the way they wanted it to go, which is fine. But you know what? They all talked it out. They all listened to each other, okay? They didn't go to all agreements and everything, but that's fine.
Bob,
okay?
again,
They're
you
gonna
should
come
not
back.
be giving us an update at what took place at another meeting.
There's been issues with that before, with that department. I
There's
think
been
coming from an
issues.
independent party, i.e. me, being there and seeing what went on, okay? And I think that how it was done
Do you think everyone is in agreement with all your opinions?
Of course not.
And yet you're going to sit here and give us your opinion of what took place tonight?
And I think it was,
see why.
my opinion actually shows that they were doing the right thing, okay? Because other people were saying maybe they're not. But at that meeting, they did the right thing, and I wanted to turn around and say that to them, okay? In a public session here. I said, yeah, they did good job and all
But
these
you
other
might,
things.
but if it didn't go the way you thought it should, you'd be here criticizing them.
No, I wouldn't have been. But see, that's you saying, well, you would be doing.
Because I've heard you sit here and criticize people during your selectmen's notes. During your very first selectmen's notes, you said, I talked to people who feel the town administrator is making too much money. How is that germane?
I still do. I still believe he does.
I understand that, Bob, but that's not here for public discussion.
I'd like to see that somewhere, Ron. I'd like to see that in writing.
Fine, I'll get it for you in writing, Sarah, if that's what you like.
I want the question to be
But
very specific.
but at the same time, I reserve the right as chair to remove it from
That's
the
fine.
agenda if it's going to continue to be abused.
No, that's fine. I
It's-
don't see it being abused right now, to
I
be honest.
understand that
It's your
you don't.
impression about being abused,
Yeah.
all right? It's good when I walk around the streets and people say, I'm glad you brought that up, because you know what, that was a really interesting,
And I get different feedback, Bob, from people I talk to.
and I brought that out too, and people have turned around and said, I didn't like that. But that's what it's so good. It's good about communication, whether you get good communication or bad. Everything is good because you have to think about something different.
No, because,
Okay?
again, Bob, and let's not go to the whole Facebook thing, but everyone has different opinions, and we need to have, if something's going to be brought up in this board meeting, it needs to be on the agenda so it can be discussed, and not just an individual board member's opinion of something that took place.
That's your interpretation. When I've talked to the open meeting law people about these issues like this, all right, it's not saying you can't discuss other issues that aren't on the agenda. And what it clearly, they keep coming back to is, if the chairman of the board did not reasonably anticipate that within 48 hours
I understand
prior
that,
to,
Bob.
that's what it says. That way, within 48 hours, if you don't know what's going on
We're
and
not
what's going to
even
be
supposed to be
sent.
having this debate now because it wasn't on the agenda to discuss whether or not to continue to have board.
No one's voting. Ron.
We're not voting on
It doesn't
anything, but.
matter to have a vote.
You can, did you know that we were going to discuss this 48 hours in advance?
No.
We're not in violation of the open meeting law.
And also it says.
Thank you very much.
The following
Bob,
matters.
it's not that simple,
It
Bob,
says the
because
following matters will be discussed and/or voted on in this meeting, and one of the items is select board update. So it is on the agenda. Because we're talking
select board
about.
I'd
updates
like-
are on the agenda, but
I have two more items I'd like to get through. Could I please get
if
through
they are
them?
innocent items, feel free.
Could I just make the one
right
request
ahead.
about when you do ask council to write to us? Could you make it very clear that the question is the difference between whether we can bring up an item and not have discussion about it, or whether it's the discussion that's the issue?
Right,
Is-
I had that conversation with him specifically, but I will ask him to reiterate it.
Thank you.
My next two things. The next one is Center Street issue. Do we have an update on that, of what's going on? Because I still see his trucks out there when I drive by. And does he have a business license in town? All right, and are the vehicles registered in Carver? Do we have that information? Do we know anything or whatnot?
And here again, I'd ask you, Bob, I mean, I have people coming to me all the time, and I simply go to the individual department and facilitate, here, hand it off there, hand it off here. So if you have questions like that, why wait for the board meeting? Why not just call in and ask and get your answer? Why would you have to feel the need to bring it up in the middle of a board meeting?
Because people should know that we're doing something about an issue.
All right, and you can say, please include that in the town administrator's update.
So my next one is the $500,000 we got from sales from property. In my opinion, I want to see that money go to the communication fund for the emergency communications that we need to know. What is it, over $1 million we'll need within a certain period of time. If we transfer that money that we got from the sale of properties into a separate fund, hold it in there, we have startup money for it, plus we have money in case we get matching funds. That's my opinion, and that's the end of my discussion here, because clearly you're not going to want to hear the final one, so, which is about supposedly me lurking in the hallways here from the town administrator and whatnot.
Just as well we're avoiding that one then.
Okay, but I gave you guys emails for it. Take a look at them. I think it's very inappropriate, no matter what. Everyone has a right to record in a public building if you want.
Bob, this is,
Whether you're recording or
you're
not.
just presenting examples of what should not be taking place.
Well, Ron, all right?
No more discussion, please. Sarah?
The first thing I wanted to point out was that the Veterans Day breakfast that was hosted by the Scouts on November 9th, I thought went really well. It was great to see some of the kids actually sitting and listening to some of the veterans tell their stories. That was very nice, and I think the veterans that were there enjoyed it. I'd also like for the following to be agenda items in the future. I'd like to know the total cost of the police station project. I believe Bob asked that question 2 weeks ago. It really shouldn't be that difficult to come by that number. I'd also like to have the department head reports, the short reports that we all voted department heads would be doing, that would be done personally by each department head, not by the town administrator. And again, this is not punitive, this is not anything except like us just wanting to hear what they do and cheer them on. And finally, the survey of town employees that was first brought up probably about 2 years ago this month. I think it's real important to do that, and I'd like to have that topic on the agenda as well. But I'd also...
Excuse me, Elaine, do you want to update that?
I don't believe I can respond to that. It's not a topic on the agenda.
Okay, that's fine. So, no, that's fine. So
If you'd like to call me tomorrow, we can have a discussion about that you'll probably
Okay.
want to have.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just to reiterate, if and when we do that, I'd like for them somehow to be anonymous, because it's very difficult for people to be, really, to feel comfortable if their name is on something.
Bob?
Just to follow up, we did get an email from the town administrator about the police station, and there were some figures
Oh, I
in
must have
there.
missed that.
I don't know when it was put out there, but
Okay.
I think it was
Thank you.
recently,
I'll-
just an
I will
FYI.
ask for a specific update on that for the next meeting.
That's great, thank you.
All set?
Yep.
Mr. Townsend?
Thank you. Just a couple of things. I also attended the Veterans Day breakfast that the Scouts put on next door. It was a wonderful event, and it really was nice to see the kids pay such close attention and to see them together with the veterans. I thought that was a very nice thing. Cranberry Village also put on a wonderful Veterans Day event, and again, it was very well attended. The room was packed, and it was really nice to see our town honor our veterans in this type of way. And there's a couple of events coming up that I want to make the public aware of. On December 5th, the Carver Police Union are holding their annual holiday toy donation drive at the police station.
What date is that?
That's December 5th, from 5:30 to 8. So if you are able, please consider dropping off a new unwrapped toy or a gift card, and their target ages are newborn to 18 years old. And as Donna Forand spoke about at the beginning of our meeting, on December 7th, the Wreaths Across Carver event, where we put wreaths on veterans' graves. Donna started this last year. It was really well attended, and it would be great to see even more people come out this year. I know she does need donations for wreaths, and Elaine, if people wanted to donate, they could probably contact the Selectman's office to get her information, right? And thank you. And on December 7th, the Friends of the Carver Council on Aging are holding their annual holiday craft fair at the COA from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And also on December 7th must be pre-Christmas Day in Carver, because lots of things going on. Shane Gives Thanks is holding their community Christmas fair from 4 to 8 at Carver Square, and I understand Santa is going to be in attendance. So some great events. I hope you have a chance to stop by one or all of them. Thank you.
Yeah, Santa's going to be at the Council on Aging craft fair.
He is as well. Santa has a busy day on December
It's a
7th.
busy day for Santa. Did we all get the invitation from Aaron Polanski for dinner at Old Colony Regional on December 5th at 6
I got it.
p.m.? And just, you know, it says to reply to, I think it's Janice Coster or whoever it is, it's included in there. So that's at 6 p.m., looking for feedback from member towns about things going on at Old Colony. We are also invited for a tour of Old Colony on Thursday, December 19th at 11:30. Bob, you've already replied to that. And it includes lunch, and if you're interested, just let me know. That invitation's been extended to the school committee and the finance committee as well. Thursday, December 5th at 10 a.m. is the grand reopening of the Carver McDonald's, and that's an invitation from the McBee family. I gather there was no RSVP. I think it's just attend if you're available. And then this Friday, November 22nd, there's a legislative luncheon invitation that we got from Valerie Grinnell, President and CEO of Cranberry Country Chamber of Commerce. It's a luncheon from noon to 1:30 at the Boston Tavern in Middleborough for a legislative update. Senators Pacheco and Rodriguez will be there, along with Representatives Oral, Gifford, and Lenatra. And were we supposed to let you know, Elaine, if we were interested in
You
attending?
can let me know, sure.
Okay. And that's all I had. Just a notification that at our next meeting on December 3rd, there'll be a discussion and possible vote on, it says disbanding, it should probably be dissolving is a softer word. Longstanding committees that no longer meet or serve its original purpose. I think Mark brought this up back in the summer, and we've just wanted to make sure that every committee involved had plenty of notification and opportunity to respond before taking any action on it.
Can I ask a quick question about that?
Yep.
So I see that you gave us a list of all the committees and the response. So it looks like there was no response from the Bike Path Committee. So did we send her a letter or anything? Just, we did?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure that everybody's aware of it, so no.
An email.
Yeah.
Okay.
And actually, there's an update to the one, because I did respond, but it was awful late, but I did finally respond. So it says there's no response from me, but I did.
So did we send then the Bike Path Committee, did we send them a letter or did we send them an email?
It was an email.
So could we send them a letter?
Sure.
Just a letter letting them know, so there's no doubt they know about it, okay? Thank you.
And then approval of energy reduction plan for Green Communities Grant.
So this is the last requirement for the town to get approved to be a green community. So we need approval from the select board.
I did speak to Michael about this, because I've been trying to push him along, because this is the last thing we need in order to be a green community and to get the green community grant. When I talked to him originally, the deadline was October to get this in, but he tells me it's been extended to November. So if we do approve it, we can still get this under the deadline and qualify for the Green Communities Grant, so.
I apologize. Do we have a copy of this energy reduction?
It was emailed to you yesterday or today. As soon as I received it, I forwarded it.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen it.
I think it
but
was
this is good.
yesterday.
What's the pleasure of the board?
I'd make a motion to approve.
Second?
Further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
All right, minutes and topics not reasonably anticipated by the chairman in advance.
3-1?
Pardon me?
3-1?
Yes, 3-1, right? You voted against it, Bob?
No, I voted in favor of it.
Oh.
You just went it too quick.
Oh, okay. So it's 4-0.
4-0.
It's unanimous. All right, so actually, I don't think we had anything extra here for the, the minutes of 10:15, what's the pleasure of the board?
Elaine, were you able to get my changes that I sent?
I responded to your email and said you needed to bring it up in the meeting
Okay.
to be voted on.
Okay. And I don't have that in front of me.
So you wanted me to change wording on something? And,
Yeah. But it was the.
So I thought the board should vote on that, not just have me change it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So it was the November 5th meeting, I think.
Mhm.
Okay. Whoops. Okay. So,
Right now, we're just looking at October 15th.
okay.
I'll make a motion to approve October 15th.
There a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? The ayes have it. Now the minutes of 11:05.
I'm not seeing them here.
They're near the bottom, near the,
You have 11:05 there.
They were in your packet because you responded to me in the email,
I
so they
know,
should be on there.
I did get them there, but I'm not seeing it here is all I'm. Oh, okay, hang on. I found it. Thank you. Okay. Okay, I apologize for holding you up. Yeah, sure. So I believe it's the bottom of page 4, under Select Board Update. I just wanted to amend the minutes by adding the fact that I began to mention some emails that we had received and a letter from 2 senior citizens who were both female about a meeting, and that I was then not allowed to talk about that topic. And I believe Bob brought something up as well. I don't remember what it was, and he also was not allowed to discuss that topic. I think that should be in the minutes, not in a vindictive way, but it's, town council's always told us in the past, if something's not in the minutes, it didn't happen. And I think we all know it did happen, and I think it should be in there.
I have no problem with this, as long as we can add the editorial comment that I felt I was acting appropriately based on my understanding of what we should be doing
Well,
with
then
select board updates.
I should be able to add my editorial comment that I was extremely offended by being not allowed to speak.
It's fine.
I don't think we should have editorial comments. I think it should just be, here's what was said. Because
Well,
that's
no,
what
because
happened.
that can be misinterpreted. I think you need context.
Ah, I see, okay. Well, I'd like to amend it. I'd like to amend the minutes to include those remarks.
Are you willing to add my wording to it as well?
Sure, if you're willing to add mine.
Okay.
I'll second the motion with all the additions you would.
You got that, Elaine?
No, I don't.
Okay.
It's basically Sarah's motion that, Sarah's making the motion that it should reference the fact that I cut her off when she was making a comment.
Okay.
And what my comment began to be about, and as well as what Bob Belbin's comment began. I'm not sure I was even here for that, but he was also cut off.
And then the reason that
by the
I did
chair.
it was because I felt I was acting according to the intent of select board updates, as we discussed this evening, but you don't have that. And then Sarah wants to add that she was offended that I cut her off.
As a fellow selectman, yes.
All right, motion made. Was there a second?
I second it.
Further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
I wanted to say something. I kind of want to see what the minutes actually say before I vote on them, even with these changes.
You didn't review the minutes ahead of time?
No, I reviewed the minutes ahead of time, but these changes that are being made, I want to see what they look like first before I vote on them.
Okay, let's hold them off till the next meeting then.
I agree.
All right, with that, our next meeting is on December 3rd and then on December 17th. With that, we come to the end of the meeting. Thank you all for joining us, and we wish everyone a wonderful Thanksgiving, and enjoy spending time with friends and family and loved ones, and all the best.
Do you need a motion to adjourn?
We'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Further discussion? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed? The ayes have it.